You know, you and I've talked several times about death because that is something you've had to face a lot of at a very early age. And it's quite remarkable in the sport of wrestling how many great wrestlers and how many famous people have died at an early age. And Animal from the Road Warriors is another case, 60 years old, young man, and passed away. Your thoughts on him? This is a man you respected and you liked.
You know, he was a great guy. And I think he was really appreciated by everybody that knew him. I don't know of anybody that ever had a bad thing to say about him. He was always a total pro. He was just an all-around good guy. And it's just a shame, you know. I'm glad in the sense that, you know, he left on his own terms. Like it was just his time. So that in wrestling, there's so many wrestlers that have died from overdoses and drug problems and suicides, and it's never nice. It's never good to hear about someone like Joe passing away. But at least it was just his time was up, I guess. And you know, all I could say about Joe was he was part of a group of wrestlers that all came out of Robbinsdale, Minnesota, which is right out of Minneapolis. Right. There's so many that all went to the same high school. I think it's Robbinsdale High School. Kurt Hennig, Hawk, Animal, Rick Rude, Barry Darsow. Like there's about 10 or 12 or 13 of them. All went to school together. I don't know how they all got into wrestling, but they did. And they were all always, there's one thing about the Minneapolis guys, kind of like the Stampede guys, they were always good wrestlers. Right. They learned well, they worked hard, they were generally pretty athletic guys that were pretty tough. Good, always represented the wrestling business in a very positive way. All of them. I mean, Hawk, I feel bad for Animal in a way, or felt bad for. I saw him last year in Anchorage, Alaska, and we had such a good talk. I'm so glad that I went to Anchorage and actually saw him. He was one of the only other wrestlers that I knew there. And we talked at length about how many wrestlers are gone, you know, how many have died, and that we were the last of a sort of a dying breed, or, you know, our generation was pretty much cleaned out in a lot of ways. And I remember talking to him and how he seemed like a guy that was in great health and had nothing but, you know, had a long, healthy life ahead of him. And Joe was always a careful guy. He was not a guy that heavy drinker or party guy. You know, he was a guy that was always in pretty good shape and took good care of himself, and was a good family man, and he was a good man in all ways. And you know, talking to him, I would never believe it. I found it shocked me when I heard the news. Like, you know, he was so happy with his life and where he was. And I know he did tell me, he goes, you know, people don't realize that, you know, Hawk was the loose cannon on the team and screwed up all the time and got them fired all the time. But it was never anything Joe did. And that's so true. And nobody ever thinks much about Animal, that he had so much at stake all the time, from, you know, a mortgage on his house and things like that. And Hawk goes nuts and, you know, blows all his money on drugs and coke and parties and, you know, misses towns. And Joe was such a straight guy and always was a good brother to Hawk too. And I know Hawk, I think when he often did I think near the end of his life, he did get his act together, and he was very remorseful about, you know, what he put Joe through, because I think it cost Joe. And you know, the Road Warriors, or the Legion of Doom, were one of the greatest, in some ways you could say the greatest tag team of all time. They were, I don't know of anybody that was bigger than them. You know, then they were, it's kind of always bothered me that we did in fact have one match with the Road Warriors or the Legion of Doom, and it was an iconic situation, because I knew that I was splitting up with Jim and I was going singles, and it'd probably be the end of the HART Foundation. We weren't going to exist anymore in a few months. And the Road Warriors, well, actually I'll call them the Legion of Doom because that's they were in the WWE. We had one match. I remember they came in and said, "You guys working a match just for Coliseum Video, just for a piece of history, to lock it in for. It's a special match just for you guys to go out there and have one, just so you can say you had one." And we were all so excited. I mean, I was really excited about the match, and so was Jim, and so was Joe, and Hawk was really excited. And I'll never understand, Hawk was always one of those self-destructive kind of guys that just before we went out to the ring, he took a bunch of Placidils or pills and got totally, he was just a train wreck. He could hardly walk out to the ring, he could hardly, and it's a testimony to Joe, me, and Jim the Anvil that we had that match. I know that if you watch it, it's still actually a pretty good match. It's the match that we planned out, except for one guy's half asleep all the way through the match. He looks like somebody that's asleep, or like wrestling a corpse.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of, he's out cold for the whole match.
That's not fair, is it?
And it kind of ruined it for all of us. And I know I was so disappointed because it meant so much for us to have a match with them. And I know that Joe and Hawk both really loved me and Jim. Like they really wanted to have a great match with us. I'll never know why Hawk did what he did. Like he really ruined what was something that was for us. And it's still a pretty good match on TV though, if you watch, especially if you know the one guy's completely out of it on about 10 Placidils. But the funny thing about Hawk, and going back to that story, is that when I came back and we had the show here in Calgary, the big In Your House pay-per-view with the Stampede Showdown or whatever it was, where the Heart Foundation took on Shamrock, Stone Cold, the Road Warriors, and Ken Shamrock were the 5 guys that we took on. And I can remember Hawk was so excited. He goes, "This is going to be the match to make up for the one I screwed up in a long time ago." And he was so excited about that match. And it was kind of like a chance to go in there and redeem himself. And he did. And it was a great, like they all worked really hard, and it was a fun experience, the whole Stampede pay-per-view.
Happy ending.
Yeah.
Clothing on the show is sponsored by Gio's Collections for Men in Calgary.